So hi there and welcome to this practical assignment. In this assignment you're going to choose your own apiary site, and as we've seen it's an important decision, and I suppose to help you do that I'm going to show you my particular apiary site, and I have the list of points that is in that resource file that you can download with the last lecture. And I'm going to go through the list in terms of my own apiary and assess my own apiary site, and hopefully that's going to help you to give you ideas maybe on choosing the best apiary site for yourself. Okay, so I'm going to go through the points and then I'm going to assess in terms of the site that I've chosen here. You can see my hive of bees here in the background. So choose a location that is close to your home as possible. Well, this location is in my garden, so it's very close to my home, and I can come down here anytime, a short stroll from my front door, and have a look at the bees and see how the bees are doing. So that one is 100% on that. The second point, generally try to keep your apiary out of sight of the public. Okay, there's a public road not too far away, but the apiary site is hidden by trees and bushes, so people can see it perhaps in the winter time when there's less leaves, but you really have to be keen, and perhaps the only kind of person that will really notice it is a beekeeper. Otherwise you just see some boxes in a corner and you wouldn't really be aware of what they are. So it's quite far back from the road, so there's no issue there, and certainly there wouldn't be any bees visible from the road or in crossing the road or anything like that. So it's quite far away from the road, so there's no issue of a risk of anybody being stung or anything like that, any pedestrians being stung or anything like that, so that's no problem. Generally hives should not be located where the bees are flying too near homes or areas used for recreation or footpaths. So no footpaths around here, there's no general public passing here, it's a private garden, so there's no issues around that. Nobody's going to get stung, or no footpaths, where the public have access to, nothing like that. So that's 100% on that. Make good use of hedges and walls, etc., to hide the hives and separate bees from people and animals. Excellent use of hedges on this site, and you can see there's a big hedge around the back of the apiary where the hives are, and there's a big hedge on the side here as well, and that separates my property from the neighbour's property, so the neighbours can't even see the hives, they don't know there are bees there, they certainly don't have any interaction with the bees. The bees do not just climb over that hedge, it's a big hedge, so the bees, when they're leaving the hive, they're flying out this way and they're flying into my garden, so the hedge is completely blocking the neighbours from the bees. And my neighbour's house is actually quite close to the hives, but it's completely hidden and separated by this big hedge here, so it's 100% on that one. Bees must be sheltered from the prevailing wind. Okay, hives should not be sited facing the prevailing wind, and that's again on that one, that no problem on that. Okay, the prevailing wind is southwesterly in Ireland, and that's from the Gulf Stream, so the winds are coming from that southwest, so the southwest would be over here, and it's completely sheltered by that big hedge, so there's no issue with that. But the actual hive entrance is facing more in a southerly direction rather than a southwesterly direction, so that's fine. So there's no issue of prevailing wind, in particular because that big hedge is blocking. Shelter bees from the sun. There is some shelter, various bits of shade, but it's not a particularly huge issue here in Ireland. It's actually good for the hives to get some sun, and the hive is facing in a southerly direction. Number 7 there, ideally face the entrance in a southerly direction. Yes, I've mentioned that it is facing in a southerly direction because we're in the northern hemisphere, so the sun comes up and basically the sun is on the hive for a long period during the day, so that's very good for the bees in this part of the world. If it was in Kenya, where I keep bees as well, the bees would be completely shaded because they wouldn't be able to stand the heat of the tropical sun. So shade is extremely important in a hot climate, whereas here it's actually beneficial to have the hive exposed to the sun, you know, at least for a good part of the day. But you know, a balance between shade and sun, not completely in the sunshine. There is various bushes here, so there is an element of shade, but there's also a good element of access to the sun. So it's kind of that, getting that balance right. Make sure there's enough space around the hive to work. Okay, so there's plenty of space around the hive. I can go around the back of the hive, the side of the hive. I can easily, you know, access the hive when I'm working the bees. So that's fine on that one. Locate hives preferably near nectar and pollen sources. Okay, so you know, I'm in my garden and this is where my bee site. So I'm kind of I'm not choosing. The primary choice for me here is just to be in my own garden and have the bees close by. There is plenty of nectar sources nearby as well, but my primary focus is just having the bees nearby in my garden. And then, as I mentioned in the lecture, you know, whatever sources are around, you know, that's fine. And of course we can always do a little bit of planting for bees as well to improve the forage if we want to within our gardens, you know, bee forage crops, which will be different, I suppose, in different countries. So like in Kenya, I showed you a picture of sunflowers. I planted sunflowers. In Ireland, you know, you could plant a crop like borage, or you know, other bee crops in your garden, or even flower mixes to improve the forage. And even things like letting the dandelions flower is very important in the springtime, because right now there's a lot of dandelions flowering, and not to just cut them down or to spray them. These kind of things can help the bees a lot. The next point there, okay, have a nearby source of water, especially in hot countries. Okay, there's plenty of water sources around. I have ponds in the garden. There's a particular pond where the bees always go to gather water, so I know where they're getting the water, and it's just in the middle of the garden, and there's no problem there. There's plenty of places for also the bees to land in the pond and to get the water. So that's 100% on access to water. Fenced apiary for livestock. There are no issues around livestock. The garden is fenced off, it's enclosed. There are no livestock roaming around the garden, so they're completely safe. They're not going to be knocked down from that perspective. The apiary site should preferably be level, cleared, and be accessible by car if away from the home. Okay, there's no need for me to, you know, have it accessible by car because my bee shed is close by. I can bring anything I need on a wheelbarrow. So the area is reasonably clear, and I do keep it the grass trimmed around, you know, to keep it, you know, at least it's accessible. Cut the bushes, and so I can work around the back of the hive without tripping over things. So you know, it's level and it's cleared. So on that, from that point of view, it's fine. Okay, hives should be accessible throughout the year. Yes, of course, it's in my own garden. I have no problem. I can access these hives anytime I want, day or night, and I'm not interfering with anybody. So that one is 100% on that. Avoid flood-prone areas to place hives. Yes, we have no issues with flooding here. Everything is safe from that perspective, so it's not a flood-prone area. So we're fine on that one. And then in urban areas, choose flat roofs or enclosed gardens. I suppose, you know, if you're in a town or in a city, yeah, flat roof would be fantastic. Or yeah, even a garden like this behind a high hedge, if you were in an urban area, you know, somewhere that your hives are going to be sheltered, are going to be hidden from prying eyes, and a place that will make the bees, you know, fly up. You know, if you have a hedge here where I'm standing and the hives are behind it, then the bees have to fly up to get over that hedge, and once they fly up, then they're away from people and livestock. Okay, so I've gone through the 15 points on the list, and it's, when I look at it now, it's a very, very good apiary site, very, very positive. It scores well on all these points as I've discussed. So I hope this example has given you ideas in terms of choosing your own apiary site. I suppose you're going to have to do the best you can with the area you have. You can also modify it if it's not particularly good. Now, in terms of my apiary site in Kenya, I did modify the situation there, because what I did was I constructed a fence around the hives, a high fence that made the bees fly high away from people and animals, and also I planted a lot of bushes around that area, so it became a kind of a bushy, fenced off area with the bees enclosed away from livestock, away from people. And I also constructed a bee house, so an artificial shade to protect the bees from the sunlight. So I created an ideal apiary site in a situation that was just a field, basically. So you can, if you don't have the right conditions, by fencing, by planting, putting up, building a fence, a high fence around your hives, all of these things can improve the site that you have and make it so that the bees are not going to cause problems, or they're not going to be stinging. And that was particularly important in Kenya with my very defensive bees, because if I didn't do that, and we were living in close proximity to those hives, if I didn't do that, then it would have been risky. We would have been getting stung, and I had small children in the house at the time, so I didn't want to have my children being stung and to be worried about that. So you can modify your situation, as I showed you there with Kenya, and as I'm showing in the pictures. If it's not your ideal position, you can improve it. So I do hope what I've shown you in this practical example can give you ideas about choosing your own apiary site, and certainly go through the list of points and try and get as many of them as possible into your apiary site, into choosing your apiary site. And then you will choose a good site, and when you choose a good site, you're going to avoid a lot of possible problems, as I mentioned before, from stinging or other issues. So once you have your bees in a nice position, there are a lot of advantages and a lot of benefits that will flow from that as you continue your beekeeping journey. So the apiary site, very important, and once you get it right from the beginning, then you're not going to have all those problems of having the bees in the wrong place, maybe your dogs or your animals being stung, or people being stung, or complaints. All of those problems you can avoid just by putting a little bit of effort now into getting your apiary site right. And you may not get everything 100%, but at least consider all the points in this and do your absolute best to address as many of them as possible. Okay, I do hope you found that useful, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Thanks very much.